Hi, I'm Ivania,
And I'm Jessica.
and we are going to tell you about the Great War, World War I. Let's start by looking at the three underlying causes that led to this war. They are nationalism, imperialism, and militarism. At the Congress of Vienna in 1815, nationalism was largely ignored in favor of peace. However, upon the unification of Italy and that of Germany, nationalism showed up on the political scene again. Nationalism played a role during the Balkan crises where Baltic states called for independence. Later, it also caused many Serbs living in Austrian-controlled territories to demand freedom.
One Serbian nationalist group, the Black Hand, took their cause too far and had its members attempt to assassinate the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand. They succeeded while the Archduke and his wife were in a car on a visit to Austrian-controlled Bosnia-Herzegovina. In terms of imperialism, the European powers fought for foreign markets to sell their goods, so the scramble for Africa stemmed from this need. Violent clashes between the various states were inevitable. Most of the battles were resolved, but some, like the conflict between Germany against Britain and France in Africa, proved to be foreshadowing elements to World War I itself.
Good morrow, sir. Good morrow, sir. Where are you from?
I just came from Africa, as you can see by the color of these fine young lads I have standing alongside me.
Oh, of course. I too have a fine selection of people, as you can see behind me, right here.
Same with my people. As you can see, I already have them holding my guns and other items.
Oh, of course. Menial labor. Fairly lowly tasks. But they are lowly people, if you can call them people at all. Well, I suppose I'll have to move along and command these people to go do some other stuff. Farewell. Goodbye.
The influence of the military on policymaking greatly expanded after 1907. This was evident especially in Germany, whose army was called a state within a state. Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, Britain, France, and Russia also increased their military expenditure. An arms race began among the European powers as they all feared an upset in the balance of power. Soon the various countries started to enlarge their armies and navies, causing tensions to grow. Because war with Serbia almost definitely meant war with Russia, because there was a large Slavic population in Serbia, Austria sought Germany's support before an official declaration of war. Germany gave Austria a blank check. So when Serbia refused to accept an ultimatum the Austrians offered, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The dominoes then started to fall.
Before we talk about war fronts or the weapons, let's talk about the two alliances pitched against each other. They were the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The Triple Alliance consisted of Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy. They were referred to as the Central Powers. The Triple Entente consisted of Russia, Great Britain, and France, and they were also known as the Allied Powers.
World War I was fought on two fronts, the Western Front and the Eastern Front. With the Schlieffen Plan, the Germans hoped to defeat France on the west and rush over to Russia on the east. Along the way, Germany invaded Belgium, and this was what incited the British to war. On the Western Front, trench warfare was the prevalent method of battle. In the trenches, conditions for soldiers were horrific, and the system itself guaranteed no easy victory for either the offense or defense, because trench warfare was a slow process. Neither side could simply break through. On the Eastern Front, Russia had mobilized quicker than the Germans thought. Russian troops began marching into Austria and East Prussia, while many German troops were still on the Western Front. However, as the war progressed, Russia lost large numbers of soldiers and had to deal with inefficient supplies of rifles and artillery for its army.
Many different sorts of weapons were used in battle during the Great War. The main weapon used was the rifle. It could fire 15 rounds a minute and kill a soldier 4,500 feet away. The machine gun needed to be operated by 4 to 6 men at a time. They had the firepower of 100 guns. Poison gas was used by the German army against the Allied powers. They specifically employed chlorine gas, which caused a burning sensation and chest pain, and mustard gas, which killed its victims. The problem with using gas was the wind frequently blew the fumes back at their own troops rather than the enemy. At the Battle of the Somme, tanks were employed. Although resistant to bullets, they could only travel up to 3 miles per hour and could not cross trenches, so they proved to be relevantly useless at the time. Planes also were used for the first time. Initially, they were used for spying purposes or to carry bombs. Later, firefighter aircrafts were created, armed with machine guns and explosives. Plane fights became known as dogfights. The Germans frequently put submarines to use, particularly their infamous U-boats. These U-boats, outfitted with torpedoes and deck guns, sunk enemy warships and other legitimate targets until the policy of unrestricted submarine warfare came to play. Because of their behavior at sea, the Germans sunk the cruise ship Lusitania in May 1915 and its passengers aboard, which included 100 or more Americans. Afraid of going to war with the U.S., the Germans decided to halt with their unrestricted submarine warfare. However, the U.S. was angered enough to start considering the possibility of entering war on the Allied side.
The Zimmermann telegram, the message in which the Germans promised the Mexicans they would help them regain American territory in exchange for allying with the Central Powers, was what pushed President Wilson into plunging the U.S. into war. Once the Americans joined the Allied side, the war quickly changed its pace. Even with Russia's withdrawal from the war in early 1918, the Allies finally defeated the Central Powers in November of that year, although Germany had a hard time believing it was beaten.
After 4 years and 3 months of fighting, peace was finally established, but not without a great cost. 10 million people were dead, 20 million were wounded. The old regime in Europe was dissolved and the economy was badly shaken. Women, however, enjoyed more independence and rights because they had taken men's place in factories during the war and thus earned money for themselves.
One of the most prominent treaties made at the end of World War I was the Versailles Treaty. This treaty, created by the Allied powers without Russia, wanted to punish the defeated and maintain the principle of self-determination. For example, Russia lost lots of land, and the countries of Poland, Finland, and other Baltic states were formed from that land. Germany lost 13% of its land and lost all its colonies. Its Rhineland was demilitarized, and they were forced to pay $33 billion in reparations. Austria-Hungary split into the countries of Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia.
Even with the signing of the Versailles Treaty, the war did not fully end. It became a burden for Europe economically, politically, and psychologically for the next 2 decades, until another world war began, one just as devastating as the first.